Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Horse's Mouth Live. My name is Ellen Rogin, and as always, I have really great guests to share information with you to help you in every area of your life, especially your business. And today's topic is sleep, which you may think, like, what does that have to do with my business? Well, it has everything to do with your business. And we have Dr. Kimberly Lemke on today, who I'll give you her formal background in a minute, but she's really an expert on sleep and was introduced by a mutual friend of ours and was just fascinated to hear her take on sleep. And it's really different. Maybe you're like me and have heard podcasts or heard speakers talk about sleep, which is always important. And I always get an idea, but I love Kimberly's take on this because she provides information that I haven't really heard anywhere else. So let me give you a more on her formal background. Dr. Kimberly Ann Lemke is the winner of the prestigious 2020 Enterprising Women of the Woman of the Year Award. She's a licensed child adolescent and adult clinical psychologist, and she's trained in CBTI for insomnia. And I don't know what that is, so we'll talk about that. Dr. Lemke is also a certified sleep science coach, and she created an online course called Drift. She also, besides working with individuals, works with corporations. She does speaking engagements, and she's all about helping her clients with better sleep, less stress, and other wellness workshops to reduce fatigue and burnout. So, Kimberly, welcome. I'm so excited that you're here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So if it's not logical to someone, why is talking about sleep an important business conversation?
It's a good question. We think about sleep as it's just one of the things we have to do, right? It's a personal sort of hygiene issue, if you will. And what we find is that it goes so much deeper than that. So we see that it affects the individual, obviously. We get a little bit crabbier, right? Our mood shifts a little bit. And what happens productivity wise, though, is that we see in businesses productivity decreases and we see errors getting made more. I use an example frequently of driving a car and training. And a lot of organizations talk about, right, how do we train our people more? And you can really train people as much as you want, but if cognitively they're impaired because they're not sleeping well, it doesn't matter, right? So if let's say, my reaction time is slowed because I'm not sleeping and I get into an accident in my car, you can train me all you want on how to drive a car. It's really not that, right? It's that I'm cognitively impaired. And so when it comes to businesses, there are so many things that sleep, sort of the effects of sleep that really show up in our businesses. So I focused on sleep to really help individuals, because when individuals feel better and do better, then corporations also feel better and do better.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. So I'm curious about to understand maybe a little bit more about how sleep works, and so that we can fall asleep easier, which I actually fall asleep pretty easily most nights, but it's the staying asleep part that can be elusive for me. So I can be like out like a light. I have good, some of the other things in terms of hygiene, but then it's 2:20 and Ellen's wide awake. So, and maybe you
Yeah.
can share a little bit about like how does sleep work and what are some ideas that can have us better at the whole night's sleep.
Sure, that's a good question. So I'll get a few things and you hit on it. So people will be like, sleep to me, I feel like comes in three issues. The first issue is I put my head on the pillow and I just can't fall asleep. So I lay there awake. And then there's people who are like, I can fall asleep without an issue, right? Immediately head hits the pillow and I'm out. And then 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock comes and I'm wide awake, right? Or, right, both of those are okay. But then what happens is that either when I wake up or when I put my head on the pillow, I can't stop my mind from racing and the thoughts that come with it. And so usually somebody falls within one of those three issues. Some people are like, I have no issue sleeping, but it's amazing how they know somebody who has an issue sleeping, whether it's a kid or it's a partner or it's a friend. And so it really is sort of a universal issue. And we read a lot about what do we need to do in the evening. So we talk a lot about, which is absolutely important and critical and helpful, right? So we talk about nighttime routines. I have 12-year-old twins who I'm super blessed with. And I can tell you that, when it was time for their bed, I didn't just run upstairs and just put them in bed and be like, I'm out, right? And then just run the other way, right? It's especially for kids, right? It's we have bath time, right? We dim down the lights, we have a story, we put on relaxing sounds and darken the room. And for adults, right, what we do is, we shut off our laptop or our computer and then we try to lay right down. And so there's such an importance in creating that nighttime ritual, and sort of getting ready for sleep. However, we don't think about like how important days are. So we think of sleep as a night issue, and I think of sleep as a day issue and a night issue. So one of the things I talk about is sleep balloons, which sounds weird, but I'm a super visual thinker. So if you think about this idea of a sleep balloon, we had colleagues that shared this idea, and I just loved it. So what happens is that during our day, sleep is a chemical and a biological issue, right? We have to build sleep chemicals in order to sleep at night. And so if you think about, you have this sort of balloon, and your job to get a good night's sleep has to happen during the day. So during the day, if you're building these sort of sleep chemicals so that the balloon gets as sort of taut and tight as possible, that's what we're going for. Because when we get that balloon sort of full of those chemicals and we add it to sort of our biological circadian rhythm clock, those two sort of work together to get us through the night. So to help us fall asleep and stay asleep. And so the key is really, what are we doing during our days that are going to help fill that sleep balloon? And so the main things that we want to look at for that are anything sensory. So the key and the secret to this, and it sounds super simple, is sunlight. It is amazing how important it is. The reason is that in our brain, we sort of have this very huge sort of part of our brain that looks at it and says, I sense light, I am starting up. And basically all that means is I'm starting up, I'm going to start, sending out chemicals, I'm going to start sending out things, I'm going to start waking up all your systems. And it's because it's light triggered. And so your body knows it's sort of wake up time. So one of the keys to sort of starting increasing those chemicals in that balloon is to get sunlight. And sunlight is key. And anything sensory is key, right? So we talk about working out and activity, and movements, and it doesn't have to be big movements, right? So people who might have some mobility issues, just stand up, right? Stretch for a minute, take some deep breaths. So anything like that you can do that sort of build that sleep balloon into this sort of taut balloon full of those sleep chemicals, so that at night when you fall asleep and then you wake up at 2, right, or that sort of 2:30 zone, that you'll have sort of enough that it can decompress that balloon more and get you through the night. And so that's one of the main sleeps that I teach people, is really focusing on light and getting light.
So I have a very specific question. Being from Chicago, we were talking before we went live about how lovely it is here today. And I shared that I had a really good night's sleep last night, and that I was outside for a decent part of the afternoon. So 2 questions. One is, does the time of day you get light matter? And 2, what if you live in Chicago or somewhere else where from November through whatever the day before yesterday was, it is cloudy and there just isn't, unless you go on vacation, it's hard to get in sunlight. Like, what do we do then?
So if we look at sort of sunlight, the reality is we don't get the picture perfect beach sunlight, right, that we picture on vacations, but we still get sunlight, right, outside in Chicago. Now it's cold and we probably have to put a jacket on and, get a little cranky when we have to walk in it. But it's still sunlight, right? And so our body still registers that as sunlight. So even just sort of, opening the windows, and even if it's cloudy, I tell people all the time about sunburn. And if you've ever been sunburned through the clouds, right, it's still getting through, right? And it's sort of the same thing, that it's still getting through. And so going out at any time is good to sort of get that sunlight in. In terms of timing of day, that's a very good question, interesting question. So if, let's say, right, I am trying to stay up a little bit later, right? Let's say I have work to do, I have deadlines to do, whatever it is. I have individuals who sort of have global organizations, and so timing becomes an issue. So if you think about sunlight as sort of a hit, if you will, for your brain, that the longer you get that, the better, and the later you get it, the better. If I'm trying to stay up later, So if my brain is like, oh, wait, there's still sun, then it's going to keep me awake. If I start sort of staying inside, closing blinds early, right, then my brain isn't going to sense it. And so what's going to happen is it's going to start sort of shutting me down a little bit earlier. So you can see how, right, if let's say I'm trying to get to bed earlier, then maybe I get sun earlier, right? And then start waking myself up earlier. Then I'm not going out late in the afternoon trying to get some of that late day sun. But if I'm trying to stay up later, I want my body to keep registering as long as it can that the sun is out. So sunlight is key. Chicago, again, if we can get some, the better, but open your windows, right? Like just get some sunlight in. There's also lamps that can help with it as well. Your body registers that, but really the key to that is that sunlight component.
I was going to ask about those light boxes, if you thought those were helpful or not. Okay, so what I'm hearing so far is light, start during the day to fill your sleep balloon. What are some other things that you think people either get busy and don't think about, or maybe haven't ever learned about sleep, getting better night's sleep?
So if you think about Zoom, right, has really sort of affected this, right? And remote sessions. And the reason is that we're stagnant, right? So we're stagnant, we're looking here, our eyes get tired, our eyes get fatigued. And so one of the things that we have to remember is really a little bit goes a long way. And so even if, we're sitting here and, we're Zooming, to not underestimate that you have 5 other senses that you can be using, right? So I always have a really cold water bottle, right? So because sensory wise, right, every time I'm drinking out of it, I'm building those sleep chemicals, right? I'm hydrating, right? I'm working towards better sleep. I have in here too, I have Big Red gum because it's one of those that it just stimulates the senses, right? So it sort of keeps you awake. I have candles everywhere that smell good. I have lotions that smell good. And so sometimes I think people forget that even if I have to be at my computer typing, or even if I have to be in a meeting, that doesn't mean I don't have other senses that aren't working, right? So I tell people, if you, right, let's say you're fatigued, you're having trouble sleeping, and you need to sort of stimulate those senses, and you're usually having tea, throw a cinnamon stick in it, right? Just sort of like jazz it up a little bit. And so it's those sort of things that we don't think of, right? We think about these big things, right? Like nighttime rituals, getting out and getting sun, which incredibly helpful, but you got other senses in there that, just a stand up, a movement, a deep breath, a cold glass of water, hot tea, a cinnamon stick, Big Red gum, I don't care what it is, you're still sort of stimulating those senses. So there's always something to be doing during the day that can help you sleep at night.
That I had never heard before. And I was looking around a little bit in my office because I know I have essential oils. I have all sorts of things around my office to see if I could grab it quickly, but I couldn't find it. But I will when we're done for sure, and use and think about that there's other benefits for having those things around. So if, as someone who's running a practice or maybe has team members, like what are things, or maybe, like you said, maybe you're a good sleeper, but other people aren't around you, aren't good sleepers. So what are ways that you could bring this up to people to either share ideas? Because whether they're, let's do it 2 ways. They're like really aware that this is an issue and happy to have suggestions. I had a conversation with someone yesterday who we had this whole sleep conversation, and we're both really open to it. But maybe there's someone who is, I don't know if they get defensive or they're feeling like they're not even aware that this is an issue for them. Can you share some communication tools to support people in our lives?
It's a good question. The good news is that, like I said before, sleep is so universal, right? So if you ask anybody, right, have you ever slept? Like the answer is always yes, right? So if somebody says like that's not important to me, but you have to do it every night, right? Like so, whether it's an issue or it's not an issue, you still have to do it, right? So if you're going to do it, why not sort of maximize how you do it, right? So the good news is you don't really run into people who say they've never slept. So I start sort of defense wise with that, right? And the other good news to it as well is honestly, it's you will always find somebody who, when you talk to them, even if they're phenomenal at sleeping, there's always someone in their life that's not, right? Whether it's their kids, or it's their partner, or it's their friends, and or it's employees, or whatever it is. And so, I just think it's a topic that is not really individualized and separate, that, it doesn't cross our minds. We have daylight savings time, we have, daylight expanding, contracting, we have school starting, we have work times shifting back to being in office, right? So sleep is always a component of our lives. And so, I always just help people look at it and say, hey, even if you don't want to know anything about it, right? I have this video about all of the biological effects of sleep, right? So if you care about your blood pressure, right? If you care about diabetes, right? If you care about cortisol levels and stress, if you care about weight, if you care about car accidents, right? Like it's so, if even if somebody can be like, I don't care about anything, but I drive a lot and I don't want to get in a car accident, it's like, great, right? Everybody can find something, right? Whether it's the health component, the psychological component, the emotional component, the social component. That's really, it's going to be hard for people to say none of this pertains to me. And so I always start there with just find the thing that matters to you, and then just come at it from that perspective.
Um, what's your opinion on things like using melatonin or other kinds of supplements to help with sleep?
That comes up so frequently. So melatonin is it. I think every time I do any sort of conversation, it shows up. It really sort of what it stands is melatonin can be helpful, and sometimes it can be also a placebo and not work. And so I always tell people, and I always have to caveat this with making sure you're primary care before you take anything. Make sure just sort of medically you're able to take anything. But sometimes it helps, and I tell people if it's working, like, do it, right? If it's not working, let's try something else. But our bodies are also, made to sleep. So it's not as if, we're trying to do something that's never been done before and we need a whole lot of help doing it, right? Like cows sleep, my dog sleeps, cats sleep, birds sleep, right? Like, so everything sleeps, right? And they're not taking melatonin. So sometimes we do biologically need it because our body isn't creating it and we need it. Sometimes though, we just use it because we haven't tried the other things. So I always tell people too, like it's out there, we can use it, but there's also so many other things that we can do. And so try those, right? And see if those work and really focus on sort of those senses, and sort of minimizing, things like naps. I always tell people too, you get one sleep balloon to fill up. And so at night, if you've used 2 hours in a nap, like your sleep balloon doesn't go, oh, those are nap chemicals, right? Like those are different, right? You've just used some. And so I always tell people just be mindful of the things you're doing that are either expanding or decreasing that balloon. And we can use melatonin or sleep aids, but I really prefer people initially start off just really trying some of these techniques, because we just know them to work. And so that's always my first line of defense is let's try to do it as natural as possible.
I'm personally curious about this. I've been a longtime meditator, so many of the people who've listened to this for a long time have heard me talk about this before. And I have a helpful belief, but I don't know if it's an actual thing. And I think helpful beliefs are fine, even if they're not actual, if they're helpful. But I'm curious. So if I wake up at 2:30 or 3 and can't fall back asleep, first of all, I get up early anyway, but not that early typically. I have this belief if I sit up and meditate that I'm recouping some of the lost sleep. And I find that I'm okay during the day. Is that like actually a thing? Or maybe, so if you can address, like, do you actually recoup some of the benefits of lost sleep? Is one question. The other question is meditation helpful for growing your sleep balloon?
So meditation is anytime that we do anything that helps sort of control our emotions and our thoughts, it's beneficial, right? It's very hard to like argue against like being in control and in calming your mind and your spirit is bad for you, right? Like it's a very sort of helpful practice. So I'm a huge fan of meditation and I'm a huge fan of any sort of relaxation. There's progressive muscle relaxation as well. Sometimes when you have a more active mind, it's harder to get into that meditative zone. And so I'll tell people if you just go online and Google progressive muscle relaxation, there's 1,000 of them. The key to that though becomes, and this is a part where there's two parts to when I talk about sleep that people get a little frustrated at me. One is naps. Like if you're a napper and I come at your nap, like it doesn't feel good. Like people get really defensive. So I'm not coming at your naps. Take your naps. Just, if you have issues with sleep, be mindful of it. The other one becomes the reality of waking up in the middle of the night and staying in bed. So sleep should really be just, your bed should really be just for sleep, right? And so what happens is we tend to lay in our bed and do things in our bed that could be relaxing, but could be sort of, creating this bond of my bed is somewhere I'm awake. And so there's Pavlov is a sort of a famous individual who talks about behaviors, and he talks about the fact of conditioning. And so what happens is he was the one who rang a bell, and the dogs. And so for listeners who don't know, he basically has a dog and he has meat. So he has, he shows the dog meat, the dog drools, we expect it, right? It's meat. Then he pairs a bell with it, right? So it's meat and bell, dog drools because there's meat. And then over a constant pairing, he removes meat, rings the bell, and the dog still drools, right? And we look at that, and naturally, a dog shouldn't be drooling to a bell. Just it's not sort of naturally what we would expect, but it's been paired over time. And what happens with sleep is that if your bed is somewhere now that over time, because you've laid in it for hours without, falling asleep, that if we've now paired our bed with someone we're awake, then we've created a bond. And that bond actually can make us stay awake. So if you are in that bed for more than 20 minutes, you're just reinforcing the bond of my bed is somewhere I'm awake versus my bed is somewhere I'm asleep. So if you're going to be in bed for more than 20 minutes, I tell people get out of bed, go to somewhere comfy, it's not a punishment, go to sort of a cozy zone and meditate there, right? And do sort of those tools there and regroup your thoughts there and recenter and refocus, and then get back into bed. If you can sort of meditate or do sort of that muscle relaxation, calm any of your thoughts, and 15 to 20 minutes, you're back asleep, no worries, stay in bed, that's good. But we really find that when you're staying in bed longer, even if you're doing something super helpful, it pairs that, and that becomes where sort of insomnia lies, is it becomes the bed is now where I'm awake, and we got to break that bond, even if we're doing sort of helpful things while we're in bed.
So I'm curious if you have an opinion about this. I was listening to a podcast with a sleep researcher who was talking about sleep divorce, where people will sleep in a different bed than their partner and they end up sleeping better. So I'm curious, with your psychologist background, if like you found that that's like a really great strategy for some people, so both people get a good night's sleep, or if there's other issues with them. I'm just curious about your opinion of, I hadn't heard that term before yesterday either, sleep divorce.
So actively in the field, we're actually making steps towards not calling it a sleep divorce. We call it sleep divorce, but it sounds so horrible, right? Everybody's like, I don't want to do that, right? Like, so we're actually trying to like pull that word out of it, right? To just sort of de-shame it a little bit, right? But the truth is, right, sleep is a very individual process. And so, right, I might need multiple blankets. My partner might need no blankets, right? I might need a soft mattress. My partner might need a firmer mattress, right? What kind of pillow do I need? What kind of, do I need a fan? Do they not need a fan? And there's so many personal and individual like components to sleep that we do find that when people sort of can sleep separate, we will see that if they're having sleep issues, sometimes they will sleep better. The caveat that I have to that, right, is that what will show up frequently is, but then how do I still sort of feel connected to my spouse, right? How do I still feel connected to my partner, right? If we're sleeping in separate rooms. And so, it can, one of the things that I do, and I sometimes have colleagues do or clients do, is within the same room, you get two mattresses, right? Like two twins, right? You put them together, you make your bed with 30 blankets, they can make theirs with none, right? And you could make it your own way so that it's totally separate. And then something psychologically as simple as buying a king mattress cover, though, or duvet or whatever, to pull over both beds, so that nobody sees it. Sometimes there's shame if somebody saw separate rooms or knew we're sleeping in separate rooms. So I tell clients all the time, before you separate out, try something like that too, where maybe, right, you can stay in the same room where touch is there, right? You can still reach out and touch somebody if you need to, there's sort of that comfort there, but you've really created your own sensory space within your bed. And to try that first, and then potentially move out, but to really have conversations about it in terms of how else are we getting sort of time together, right? Are we, watching TV together? Can we go for a walk at night more in the evening? Maybe we're eating dinner without distractions so we feel more connected. So, when we sleep in separate rooms, it helps sleep, but then we also have to make sure sort of we're maintaining the connection as well.
Right. Kimberly, just in the last minute or two that we have left, two things. One, like when you actually work or coach with organizations, like what does that look like? And then if there's any last tip that you want to leave us with, love to hear that.
So with organizations, I really work on sort of what's the pain point of the organization. Are we seeing stress? Are we seeing burnout? Are we seeing errors, productivity, concentration issues? And then to really go in and teach employees how to sleep and teach them how to do it in a way that it's effective so that when they come to work in the morning, right, emotionally, psychologically, and physically, they're able to be as healthy as they can be. And so I work with organizations on where do we need to focus, right? What are the goals of the individuals and what are the corporate goals and how do we align those? And how do we walk the walk? So I tell companies all the time that you got to walk the walk, right? So if I'm saying to you, it's important that you sleep as my employee, and then I'm sending you emails at 9:30 in the evening, I don't know that I'm walking the walk on that, right? So I really help companies look at it big picture too and say, what do we need to do so that we walk the walk that, we value sort of productivity, we value your health, we value all those sort of things about you. And so that's what I do sort of consulting wise with them. In terms of takeaway, I'm a huge fan of any time is a time to work on sleep, right? And so we don't have to wait until 9 o'clock at sleep and start our lavender mist. Lavender is amazing, but to your point, like find the grapefruit mist, find the lemon mist and put that on during the day. After you watch this, like go outside for a minute, just get a minute, take a deep breath, get some sunlight in, work on that sensory stuff. Pay attention to when you're opening your blinds in the morning as soon as possible. And if you're laying in that bed for too long at night, then to get out of that bed. And one of the things that I help people with as well is that sort of slowing down your mind racing, because sometimes we just also get in bed and it's, ooh, what's my to-do list? Or, ooh, I'm worried about this. And we have to sort of slow that all down. So there's stuff that you can do during the day that will help all this. And we don't have to wait until nighttime to do it.
Beautiful. I love this. And I know you have an online course beside, but let me just say this first. For people in financial services or other companies, if you're looking for a great speaker, like what an important topic, reach out to Kimberly. And also, I know you have this online course and you have a special discount for people watching this. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So if you go to driftcourse.com and you put in the special code that I think we'll show you on the screen, then that will give you sort of discount on the course. And that will really go through a lot of the detail that we've talked about. It's got a workbook in it. It's got a lot of things that will really help you come up with your individualized sleep plan, where it's not going to be a lot of work and you can start it immediately and start getting better sleep immediately. So driftcourse.com is the website. So if you go there and use the code, then you'll get a discount, and corporations are welcome to reach out to me. LinkedIn, Dr. Kimberly Lemke, Instagram, Dr. Kimberly Lemke, TikTok, it's just Dr. Kimberly Lemke, anyway, pretty much anywhere. So happy to sort of talk to companies about it or individuals and help people sleep better.
Love that. And, I'm thinking if you happen to be a great sleeper, but someone on your team isn't, what a beautiful gift to get them this course. So thank you so much for being here. And not only because it's lovely out, but because I want to have a good night's sleep tonight. As soon as we're done, I'm going to walk outside in this beautiful sunny day in the Chicago area, but really grateful. And thank you so much for being here and sharing this really practical information, Kimberly. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you, all of you watching and listening to this. Again, my name is Ellen Rogin. And if you go to ellenrogin.com/horse's mouth, you can download my special report, which is all about what extraordinary advisors know that others don't. I have some master classes coming up. I'd love to connect with you if we're not already connected on LinkedIn. Let's do that. And my question to have you ponder today is, how are you going to increase your sleep balloon? Remember to be great and create great every single day.